Welcome CSC 121 class. This is EX16 checkerboard, and this is the finished product right here. And if we take a look at it, just note that there's 8 squares across, 4 black squares, 4 white ones. We're only going to do the black squares because that'll be a little bit easier. So we're only going to do black squares. So we're just going to have 4 black squares in each row, except they're going to alternate each row. So they start here at the very first. We're going to start here at -200, -200, and then we're going to have 4 black squares which alternate, and then we're going to have 8 rows all together to make a full checkerboard. So that's our finished product. I'll run it just so you can see. You'll see how it's created actually when I run it. You can see basically made 1 row, and it made all those rows, and then it made the odd rows, or those are the evens or whatever. I guess that it starts with the odd rows starting with the bottom, and then it creates those, and then it does the even rows, however you want to say that. I called it shifted row, but that's what it does. And then to make it look nice and bordered, we just threw a square at the end that has no fill, or it has a transparent fill, so it has kind of a pen border on the outside. So that's all that is. So we're going to just start, like we do everything else. We're going to make 1 square first and kind of build up from there. So we're going to make 1 square, and we set this up so it's 50. So this is 50, 50. So when you make 1 square and then jump over another one, which is going to happen here, it's actually going to be 100. So that the sides of these squares are going to be 50, so we'll have to remember that. So we're going to start off by just drawing 1 square. So you don't have to watch me type all this. When you go into Repeal, remember to make a new Repeal. They have a nice new Repeal button here, and make sure you choose Turtle when you do that. And I'm just going to call it EX16 checkerboard. That's all you have to call it. And there it is. And I'm gonna paste in my text. So there's nothing here that you don't know how to do already. We're importing our turtle module. We're instantiating our turtle, and I called him Bill in this case, and doing a speed of 0 because it's just going to be faster. Creating all the squares is going to take a while, so you don't want to be watching all those 64 squares get created or how many. And then we're actually going to hide them right away so that we don't see them, because they're going to have to go down here in a corner and start making squares. So that's the first part. That's just the instantiating. That's pretty easy. And it's called draw 1 black square, and I'm just going to say draw square because when I first started it, I was going to do black squares and then white squares, but it was easier just to kind of do black squares and jump over them. And you can see what happens here. This is pen down, so I could even say pen down if you're not sure what down is. So we got to put the pen down so he can start drawing a square. And then we've done this before. This is just our for loop that creates a square. It goes forward 50, this is our size, and 90 degrees makes a square, and then we end fill. And just remember, the begin fill, end fill kind of surrounds, goes outside the for loop. So if I run this, nothing happens actually. And why? Well, we didn't call the function yet. So if we want to check it out, you can copy this here and just put it down as a function call. This is going to be draw square, and it's actually going to draw Bill. That's the name I gave him here. You can give him any name you want. Now if we draw square, it should draw a square. Now it's drawing it in the middle. So what we're going to do with our next function, we're going to create another function, and then this will be part of it. But what we'll do with our next function is actually create a function that starts drawing a square down here and then runs through a loop and draws for them 100 pixels, whatever size they are apart. So that's going to be the next part of this. So that'll be inside of there. So we'll start creating another function here, and I'll call it def. So I'll call it bottom row. And I'll put a T in here. And what's going to happen here is draw square is going to go in there. So I can even cut it and put it in here. That's going to be one of the things that's going to happen in here when we draw a row, except we're going to do it a certain amount of time. So we can make a for loop. So I'm going to do for I in range, and we'll do it 4 times. We'll make 4 of these, and I'll indent this. And so it's going to draw 4 squares. Now we wanted to actually update an x and y afterwards. So we have to think about a couple things. We have to think about if we set an x and y of negative, that's where it's going to start, -200, -200 down here, because it's at 0, 0. So it's going to be down here at -200, -200. So they're going to have to go there first. So that's going to be one of the things that's going to have to happen. So I could even put that in here, and I could do a go to, and I could do x, y. Now, I didn't make any variables for x, y, but I can go in here, and maybe I'll put it outside the loop, because remember, you don't want to put a variable inside a loop because then it'll reset every time you go through, but I'll put it outside here, and I'll just say x equals 200, and I'll say y equals minus 200. They're going to be minus 200. They're both going to be minus, so that they're going down below the zeros. So it's left of the zeros down, so that's minus 200, minus 200. And then it's going to draw the squares here. Now if we do this, if I actually ran it right now, keep in mind, since I put this function inside the bottom row function, I should put a t here, what's going to happen is I don't have anything calling this function right now. So now I'm going to pull another one out here, and I'll just put it outside here. And it's still Bill, so I'll put Bill in here. And I'll just run this function. And nothing's happening because, let's see, I have an error, and let's see what that is. Bad input line 19. What did I do here? For I in range. And you can see what I did. It's not telling me, but bad input usually means you type something wrong. That's usually a syntax when you see bad input. And my input is that I didn't put my colon there. It would be nice if it would just tell me that, but it didn't. So let's try it again. And that's what happens. And that gives you an idea of what's going to happen. This is where it's going to start. Now, we have the pen down. Now, before it goes there, whenever you see a pen line, what you want to think is, I want to pull the pen up before it goes there. So before it does the go-to, this is the go-to. This thing here where it's starting here and going there, it's doing the go-to. So before that go-to, what I can do is do a pen up, and I could just call it up. You don't have to, unless pen up makes more sense to you. I'm just going to do a pen up, or just t dot up. And now that should take away the pen and just create it there. So now we also want to make 3 more, and we want to jump over each other. So what we're going to have to do here for each one, it's running it it actually is running it 4 times, except it's running it right on top of each other right now. What we want to do is we want to update the x each time. So we want to say x plus equals 100. And what that'll do is at the end of each loop, of each iteration of the loop, it'll move x over 100. So if I run it, it should do it. There's our row. So there's our bottom row. So that wasn't too hard as far as what we're doing so far. Now what we need to do is we need to update this row and make a second row. And that's not that hard to do because we can actually put a for loop in a for loop. So I'm just going to put for I in range, and you could use I again as long as it's not in the same loop. And I'm going to do 4 more and make sure I put the colon this time. And if you need to indent a bunch of lines in a row, you could just highlight them and hit your tab key. So what's going to happen now, it's going to do 4, but it'll do them right on top of each other. So what needs to happen in this particular function is it needs to update the y. Now we already have a y up here when it runs the function of negative 200. And actually what's going to happen before it makes another row, it's going to kind of reset the y. Because right now it's saying y equals negative 200. So what we want to do is after it runs through one of these, we actually want it to go to, we want the y to go up. So it's going to go up to, and it's going to actually skip over one. What we're going to do is we're going to do the one that skips over it. So we're going to do all the ones that are kind of the even rows. We're going to do these. So we're going to do this one, this one, this one, and this one. We're going to do that first before we worry about shifting the x. Because then we'd have to shift the x and then shift the x back and all that, and that would be kind of a hassle. So we're going to just focus on the ones that just repeat up first. So that's what we're going to do first. We're going to repeat them up. So then after it runs 1 through 1 row, what we can do here is we can say y equals, or y plus, whatever works out here. We're going to say y plus equals, and it's going to be 100 because it's going to jump over 1. Because remember, our square is 50, so we want to jump up 1 when it does that. So that's going to add to that. So if it's going upwards, that's just adding positive. So that's okay to do that. So each time it goes through the loop, it's going to add 100 to it. And let's just see what happens. And that didn't work. Oh, I see what we did. This has to be at the end, first of all. Let's cut that. 2 things we have to do here. This has to be at the end, and it's good we saw that because we could see what happens here. You can see what happened. It's running them over there, so it's not resetting the. Actually, the y is working okay. That's actually fine. I was afraid to look. I thought something really got messed up, but you can see what happened here. It actually worked, except it's not resetting the x. That's the problem. They're going up, so the y. Let me undo that because because the y is okay. I'll put my y back there. What we have to do is we have to reset the x, because if you remember, down here, and I'll move this over so you can see it, down here, the last time the loop was, it had moved it over that many times. So nothing reset it to go back there. So we also have to reset our x. So we just have to, copy this really. We can copy this and just put it here, and that just resets it. So let's see what happens there. That looks like it works. I think that's okay. I think this should go down here, because I think what happened here is it comes into here first, and then it shifted the y up. So we don't want the y to shift until here, until after the first loop. So we want it to, so let me run it again. I'll show you what I mean. We want it to start down there and finish up, and then extend the y. So that's why we're putting this one, we're putting here basically after it runs, where once it starts a new row, we want to reset the x. But down here, right after the loop's finished, after the first one's finished, then we kind of make the y go up. We don't want the y to go up before it even starts, and that's what we just did the first time. So this is correct now. And again, I'm just doing this by memory, so but it's actually good to see when things happen like that. So that's the first part of this. So this would actually be a good place to take a break. So for our next video, we'll do the other row that's going up that's shifted, and then we'll put the box around it. So we'll do that in part 2. So this will end part 1.